I'd like to go ahead and welcome Martha Herring with the Clinical Trial Support Unit.
Hello, and good morning to everybody, and thank you for having me. I am Martha Herring. I am the Deputy Project Director of the Clinical Trial Support Unit, and today we're going to go over some CTSU updates. This is similar to the presentation we gave last night. There is a couple of additional slides I've put in today. It's a little different than what's on the agenda today, but I think it'll have a lot of good information for you. So our agenda today, we're going to go over the accrual updates in open. We'll go over some new features to the delegation of task log and the source document portal. We'll have some reminders about the data quality portal, some reminders about CIRB use requirements, and some roster reminders. So let's start with open. In open, there are new accrual columns were added to the open history screen. They'll include step types and whether those step types count towards accrual. And if you remember, your step types are screening, intervention, and other. And each enrollment step will display as a separate row. Most studies will only have an intervention step. Some studies will have multiple steps. If there are multiple steps of the same type, for example, intervention, they're going to be rolled up. A good example of this will be match. So this is just a screenshot. It does show the step type, and the count towards. You'll also notice next to the study there are now I buttons or information buttons. These information buttons show at a glance, and you'll see these quite commonly in all the CTSU applications, such as the website. This is going to give you general protocol information, like the registration steps, the type of persons that need to be collected for that study in open, the funding information, and enrollment information. And this is just an example of what that at a glance looks like. You'll see this familiar now on the website, the accrual graphic, information on the study, the integrations that are used, and the registration steps. So moving on to the delegation of task log updates and new features in the DTL. One of the new features is the LPO or lead protocol organization can now design their DTL template to assign a minimum number of persons to a task. The current template allows you to do a maximum number of persons. For example, you can have 2 DTLAs assigned. This is different. It gives you a minimum, and it's not required for every task. There's also task restrictions can now be set. This would not allow you, if a person assigned a particular task, to assign that person to another task. So for example, there's an unblinded study personnel task. That person can't have the RAVE CRA task. Makes sense, right? You're blinded, you shouldn't be entering the data too. There's also the ability to set training requirements on a particular task per person. So that person, when they're assigned the task, has to submit the training requirement to make that task go to an active status. Sites will upload their training document using the DTL. A reviewer will review and approve or reject that documentation. The status of that review is available in the DTL. The task remains pending until it is approved. And if it's rejected, a notification by email will go to the DTLA. So why did we make these changes? The big push for this was this upcoming study, NRG GY018, which has the unblinded study personnel task. You must assign a minimum of 2 people at your site that task, and they must submit the pharmacy agreements through the DTL. Those agreements will be reviewed by staff at the Pharmaceutical Management Branch of CTAP and approved or rejected. Hopefully approved, so you can move forward with your study. The next update I'd like to give is on the source document portal. Just by a show of hands, how many have used the source document portal for central monitoring and to upload documents? Okay, a few. It is still in a pilot phase. So just a reminder, the source document portal is an application on the CTSU website in the auditing and monitoring section. It allows the upload and storage of source documents to support activities such as central monitoring, and starting this summer, there'll also be patient eligibility review. Within the application, it does have the ability to allow you to redact personally identifiable information, or PII. And we are currently piloting, as I said, in the central monitoring. So some of the enhancements, there's now annotation that's automatically added to the form: study, site, and patient identifier. Also allows document type identification and/or the use of a relevant document. There's also now, for the LPO staff, the ability to redact the PII when they're triaging the uploaded source documentation, and they also have access to a report. So let's talk a little bit about the document upload and annotation process. Remember, when you upload a document for central monitoring, it must be in a PDF format, and it is for a single patient and visit. So don't try to upload multiple patients at once. It will be automatically annotated, and you can use the redaction tool, or you can redact prior to uploading the PDF document, and then you save the document. If you save the document, the annotation and redaction is burned in. So the only way you can change it is to delete the document and re-upload it. The annotation, as I said, will be displayed at the time of document upload. You can hide the annotation. It can't be deleted, sort of. There is a way to remove it totally. And you can move the default position if it's blocking necessary information. And you should do the changes to the annotation prior to saving the document. To redact, you'll select the redact, click and drag that box over the information you want to redact, and then save the document. You will have to go to the bottom and check that you have redacted all PII from the document, and then save. I wanted to go over now a little bit about the data quality portal. I'm not going to go into depth because you've already had another presentation by your statistician that went through the data quality portal, but we also have a nice FAQ sheet on it out at the table that you can stop by and pick up if you want to get some more information. So there are a number of reports available on the data quality portal: a summary table, an aging report, rave delinquencies and queries by form, and timeliness reports. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples here. The summary table is located under data management on the rave homepage, and it's going to provide summary counts of total delinquencies and queries for each protocol. A hash means there is no delinquent forms or queries for the protocol, and NA means the rave calendaring feature is not available, and that data is not available. The timeliness reports are available in the DQP reports module, and they provide metrics of expected forms and queries for all protocols or sites, or for a specific site that the user's linked to. They are posted quarterly, but they are not updated after posting, so they are not a real-time report. So example of the DQP FAQs, this is what you'll find on the document that's out at the table, is why is my form still specified as delinquent on DQP and I've entered it in rave? One reason may be that it's not considered a complete form until all those system and non-conformant queries have been answered. So once those are answered, do allow 24 hours for the refresh to occur, and if you still see it and you think there's an issue, then you should be contacting the organization leading the study to follow up with them. Another example, why does the DQP say I have delinquent forms? When I go look at the task summary, I don't see them. The delinquent queries and forms are not always listed in the task summary, so we do recommend that you go down to the form and field level to ensure that you've caught all of those queries. CIRB use requirements. Most of you are familiar with these or aware of these. These kicked in on March 1st, but I wanted to give you a couple of slides in case you hadn't heard at this point. So this is all U.S. sites participating on trials through the NCTN or NCORP must be a member of the CIRB to continue to enroll trials. This was implemented on March 1st. Those sites that did not meet that requirement were put in a suspended status on the NCTN and NCORP rosters, which meant they could no longer enroll patients. Once they become a CIRB member, that status will automatically revert back to active. And not to go into too much detail, but part of this requirement is any NCTN or NCORP study that activated after March 1st, 2019. If you're a US NCTN or NCORP site, you must use the CIRB. If the study was CIRB reviewed but activated prior to March 1st, 2019, and you used your local IRB for your initial activation, you can continue to use your local IRB, but if it's after March 1st and it's your initial activation of the study, you must use the CIRB. We do have a couple of exceptions. If your local IRB approved that study prior to March 1st, and they are simply adding another site to their already existing review, so you're part of a local network and they're just adding another satellite, those sites can go under the local. The other exception we shouldn't be seeing much of at all anymore is that if your local IRB reviewed that study at full board review initially prior to March 1st with contingencies, we would accept the contingencies after March 1st. But given we're late April, if you had that scenario, you probably met those contingencies by now. The final thing I want to go over is some roster reminders. With all the changes, the implementation of the RCR, all the new regulatory rules and checks that we have in our regulatory support system, and even the retirement of the CTSU roster, we've noted several things that have come up over the last couple of months where it's important that we get some of the data a little cleaner in some cases. So first thing we want to give you some advice on is if somebody is to leave your institution and you need to withdraw a person, some good checks to look at before you withdraw that person is, are they a site protocol PI, the PI on the IRB approval? If they are, and the CIRB is your IRB of record, you're going to want to submit a change PI form. If you're using your local IRB, you're going to want to let the CTSU regulatory office know that you are changing the PI. Is that PI used and open as the credited drug shipment or credited drug shipment or treating investigator? If so, you may want to use the transfer and update module to go ahead and update that information in open. Are they acting as a clinical investigator on the DTL? You're certainly going to want to reassign that CI task on the DTL so your DTL does not go to unapproved and you don't have problems with your site registration. And also if you have other role assignments that person is critical to, such as a RAVE CRA, and that's only one or two or three people that might be at your site with that role, triad access, open access, primary contacts at your site. Make sure those roles are reassigned before that person's withdrawn. Then when you're ready to withdraw that person, certainly for people registered as Associate Plus, non-physician investigators or investigators, have your registration coordinator contact the RCR help desk and inform them that person is no longer going to be at your site. When their CTAP status goes to relocated or withdrawn or inactive, that actually automatically withdraws them from all treatment rosters in RSS. You can also use NCORP SYS in the Roster Update Management System or RUMS to withdraw individuals from rosters. Speaking of our site protocol PI checks, many of you got the emails through last fall and early this year that we needed to get your site protocol PIs aligned with the sites that they were covering. These are some of the checks that we want to inform you of. If the practice site's not listed, you'll need to go into RCR and include that practice site on the investigator's profile. If the IRB number is not listed, you'll need to do the same. Your PIs need to be active with CTEP, so if they have a suspended status, please go ahead and have them re-registered. Just a warning, if that status stays suspended for greater than a year, that also triggers automatic withdrawals from all the treatment rosters. One that's a little less common is if they do not have the correct registration type. In that case, you may need to select another investigator. And also one you'll occasionally see is that if you're using the CIRB, that investigator's not on the CIRB signatory roster, which you can correct by just going into RUMS and adding them. Another thing we've noticed quite frequently with all the new checks is it's starting to bring up things like, I've gone in to register my investigator in RCR and it says they're linked to this site. They haven't been linked to that site in 6 months. But in the system, it still says they're active there. So if you have a site that's leaving your network or is not going to participate in research anymore, you'll need to do some things to make sure that you don't, down the road, get caught with some data that doesn't look correct. One, you'll want to determine the status of all those patients. Are they off study? Are they transferring? Is that site going to continue to follow those patients? If there's transferring, you'll want to go to and use the transfer and update module to make sure that they're aligned with the correct site. If they're going to continue to be followed at that site, you want to make sure that the people at those sites have the right access to be able to still access the protocol on the website, enter data in RAVE. One thing I think people don't want to see at the LPOs, or I'll speak for NCI here, is that we just pull these patients off studies. So again, are they going to be followed at the site? If you do want to make sure if they are off study, make sure you contact the LPOs and that all of your forms have been submitted per instructions. You'll also want to notify your network administrator for main member sites, NCORPs, and LAPS. They will notify the grant holder, be that the LAPS contact, following the NCORP guidelines, or the main members will notify the groups. You may need to withdraw that site from under your CIRB signatory, and if possible, submit some withdrawal forms to the CTSU regulatory office if that site's no longer going to participate. Particularly important for studies that are still ongoing and active, because then that site looks like it's a participant on clinicaltrials.gov or cancer.gov when it really is no longer. Transferring a site, very similar. What's the status of the patients? Is this a site that's going to be under, let's say, a new NCORP parent, or is moving from the main member swim lane to going under a LAPS? One of the big things with transferring under a new parent is what's the status of IRB coverage? Does that site need a new signatory? Does the new swim lane use a different signatory? Is the local IRB still going to continue to follow those patients? So that's one of the big things when sites transfer to a new parent organization. You may need to also withdraw the network staff via NCORP, CIS, or RUMS, because if that network staff is no longer going to be responsible for submission of data, again, you need to have somebody at that local site that is given those rights so they can continue to follow those patients. I've seen this several times in the system where I go in and I see there's patients still on study and I go to look for a person to contact and everybody at the site is withdrawn. So we're kind of stuck. And then finally, you'll also want to notify the grant holder that this change has occurred. One thing I do also want to remind you of, that if the site is literally no longer a healthcare facility, it's closed its doors, Starbucks moved in, notify the enterprise core unit. and they will take the appropriate steps to get that site inactivated, that site code inactivated. So this version of the slide set is going to be posted to the CTSU website with some modifications. It should be available in May. We will put something in the bi-monthly broadcast when that occurs, and it'll also be posted to the website under the Resources tab.